Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. In just the past few days, America has bid farewell to some truly extraordinary individuals, legends whose influence has shaped our culture, inspired countless lives, and will continue to echo through generations. Today, we pay tribute to their remarkable journeys, celebrate their timeless achievements, and reflect on the legacies they've left behind. If their stories have ever touched your heart, I invite you to honor them by liking this video, a small gesture to help keep their memory alive. Now, let's begin this heartfelt remembrance. Actress Pat Crowley, whose career spanned the golden age of Hollywood through the rise of modern television, passed away on September 14, 2025. She was 91. Born in Elephant, Pennsylvania in 1933, Crowley entered the entertainment world with a quiet determination and a natural grace that would define her presence for decades. Her breakthrough came in 1953 with Money from Home, where she starred opposite the legendary duo Martin and Lewis. That performance marked the beginning of a journey that would see her evolve from promising newcomer to seasoned artist. Soon after, she earned critical acclaim in Forever Female, sharing the screen with Ginger Rogers and William Holden. Her portrayal was so compelling that she received a Golden Globe Award as the most promising newcomer, a recognition that foretold the enduring career ahead. In the 1960s, Crowley transitioned seamlessly into television, becoming a household name as the lead in NBC's Please Don't Eat the Daisies from 1965 to 1967. Her warmth and wit resonated with audiences, and she became a familiar face in living rooms across America. Her versatility allowed her to appear in a wide range of beloved series, from Maverick and The Twilight Zone to Murder. She wrote and even Friends decades later. In the latter part of her career, she embraced roles in daytime dramas like The Bold and the Beautiful and Port Charles, ensuring that her work reached viewers of all ages. Off-screen, Crowley was a devoted mother of two, balancing her professional achievements with personal commitments. Colleagues remembered her as disciplined, gracious, and deeply respectful of her craft, a woman who brought dignity to every role, no matter how large or small. Her career reflected the evolution of American entertainment itself, moving fluidly between film, television, and stage. She didn't chase fame. She built a legacy through steady, admired performances that stood the test of time. To honor her memory, you may comment R.I.P. Pat Crowley, or simply write the number 91, her age, as a quiet tribute to a woman whose presence on screen continues to live in our hearts. Actress Pat Crowley, whose luminous presence graced film, television, and stage for over half a century, passed away on September 14, 2025. She was 91 years old. Her death marks the end of an era, a quiet closing of a chapter in American entertainment history that she helped write with elegance, discipline, and enduring charm. Born in Elephant, Pennsylvania in 1933, Crowley was raised in a time when the arts were both a dream and a discipline. She entered the world of performance with a rare blend of ambition and humility, quickly distinguishing herself not by volume, but by precision. Each role carefully chosen, each performance deeply felt. Her breakout came in 1953 with Money from Home, where she starred opposite the legendary comedy duo Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. The film was a commercial success, but more importantly, it introduced audiences to Crowley's natural screen presence, warm, intelligent, and quietly magnetic. Soon after, she earned critical acclaim in Forever Female, sharing the screen with Ginger Rogers and William Holden. Her performance was so compelling that she was awarded a Golden Globe as the most promising newcomer. It was a title she would live up to not with flash, but with consistency. In the 1960s, Crowley transitioned to television, a medium still finding its rhythm. She became a household name as the lead in NBC's Please Don't Eat the Daisies, which ran from 1965 to 1967. Her portrayal of a witty, grounded mother resonated with viewers navigating the changing dynamics of American family life. But Crowley was never confined to one genre or generation. Her career was a mosaic of appearances in iconic series, Maverick, The Twilight Zone, Murder, she wrote, and even Friends, decades later. Each role, whether comedic or dramatic, carried her signature blend of grace and emotional truth. In the latter part of her career, she embraced roles in daytime dramas such as The Bold and the Beautiful and Port Charles. These performances connected her to younger audiences and reaffirmed her ability to adapt, evolve, and remain relevant in an ever-shifting industry. Off-screen, Crowley was a devoted mother of two, balancing her professional achievements with personal commitments. She was remembered by colleagues not only for her talent, but for her discipline, her kindness, and her unwavering respect for the craft. She was the kind of actor who elevated every scene not by dominating it, but by enriching it. Her career mirrored the evolution of American entertainment itself. From the golden age of studio films to the rise of serialized television, Crowley moved fluidly between mediums, never chasing fame, but always pursuing excellence. She leaves behind a legacy built not on one iconic role, but on decades of steady, admired performances. Her body of work is a testament to the power of quiet brilliance, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but earns it. To honor her memory, you may comment R.I.P. Pat Crowley or simply write the number 91, her age, as a tribute to a woman whose presence on screen continues to live in our hearts. Her story is not just one of roles played, but of lives touched. Pat Crowley was more than an actress. She was a witness to the changing tides of culture, a participant in its shaping and a keeper of its grace. Robert Redford, one of the last great icons of Hollywood's golden age and a defining voice of American cinema, passed away peacefully on September 16, 2025. He was 89. His final moments were spent at his beloved home in Sundance, Utah, surrounded by family, a fitting farewell for a man whose life was rooted in nature, storytelling, and quiet conviction. Born in 1936 in Santa Monica, California, and raised in Los Angeles, Redford's path to stardom was anything but conventional. He studied painting in Europe, struggled with personal loss, and eventually found his way to acting in New York. There, on the stages of Broadway and in early television roles, he honed a craft that would later captivate the world. His breakthrough came in 1969 with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where he starred opposite Paul Newman. The film was more than a hit, it was a cultural shift. Redford's portrayal of the charming outlaw Sundance captured the restless spirit of a generation. Overnight, he became more than an actor. He became a symbol of cinematic cool, of thoughtful rebellion, of American possibility. The 1970s belonged to him. He starred in Jeremiah Johnson, The Way We Were, and The Sting, the latter reuniting him with Newman in a film that swept the Academy Awards. Redford's performances were never loud, but always resonant. He had a way of making silence speak, of letting the camera linger on thought rather than action. In 1976, he produced and starred in All the President's Men, dramatizing the Watergate investigation. It wasn't just a film, it was a statement. Redford used his platform to illuminate truth, to challenge power, and to remind audiences that cinema could be both art and activism. His directorial debut, Ordinary People, 1980, earned him an Academy Award for Best Director. It was a quiet, devastating portrait of grief and family, and it confirmed what many already suspected. Redford's vision extended far beyond the roles he played. Throughout the decades, he continued to explore stories of conscience and humanity. A River Runs Through It, quiz show, The Horse Whisperer. Even in his later years, he delivered commanding performances in All Is Lost, a survival drama with no dialogue, and The Old Man and the Gun, a gentle farewell to the kind of character he had once defined. But Redford's legacy stretches far beyond the screen. In 1981, he founded the Sundance Institute and Film Festival, creating a sanctuary for independent voices in cinema. Sundance became a launchpad for filmmakers who might otherwise never have been heard. It was his gift to the future, a place where art could thrive without compromise. He was also a passionate environmentalist and political activist, unafraid to speak out for causes he believed in. His personal life carried both joy and sorrow. He married historian Lola Van Wageningen, with whom he had 4 children, and later married painter Sybil Zaggers. He endured the profound grief of losing 2 sons, yet remained resilient, grounded, and devoted to his work and family. Today, tributes pour in from across the film and political worlds. Fellow actors remember his generosity. Filmmakers recall his guidance. Audiences hold on to the countless memories he gave them, moments of beauty, truth, and quiet power. Robert Redford's legacy is one of artistry, independence, and integrity. He didn't just act. He built institutions, shaped culture, and gave voice to the voiceless. To honor him, leave a simple message. R.I.P. Robert Redford, or the number 89 in the comments. It is a quiet but powerful way to thank a man who helped shape cinema and gave us stories that will live forever. He was the Sundance Kid, the storyteller, the builder, the conscience, and now the memory. Robert Redford, the actor, director, producer, activist, and founder of Sundance, passed away peacefully on September 16, 2025, at the age of 89. His final breath was taken in the quiet beauty of Sundance, Utah, a place he built not just as a home, but as a haven for artists, dreamers, and truth-tellers. Redford was more than a movie star. He was a movement. A man whose career mirrored the shifting soul of America, from the rebellious optimism of the 1960s to the introspective reckonings of the 21st century. Born in 1936 in Santa Monica and raised in Los Angeles, Redford's early life was marked by both promise and pain. He lost his mother at a young age, struggled with direction, and eventually found solace in art. He studied painting in Europe, then acting in New York, where he began to shape the quiet intensity that would become his signature. His rise to fame was not meteoric, it was earned. Through stage work, television roles, and a growing reputation for depth and discipline, Redford built a foundation that would support one of the most influential careers in cinematic history. Then came Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. Paired with Paul Newman, Redford didn't just play a role. He embodied a new kind of masculinity, thoughtful, ironic, and emotionally layered. The film was a cultural earthquake. Redford became the face of a generation that questioned authority, embraced complexity, and sought meaning beyond the surface. The 1970s were his golden decade. He starred in Jeremiah Johnson, a meditation on solitude and survival, The Way We Were, a romantic epic that explored memory and regret, and The Sting, a dazzling con artist caper that reunited him with Newman and swept the Oscars. But Redford was never content to remain in front of the camera. In 1976, he produced and starred in All the President's Men, a film that dramatized the Watergate scandal with journalistic precision and moral urgency. It was a turning point, not just in his career, but in American cinema. Redford proved that movies could be both entertaining and essential. In 1980, he stepped behind the camera to direct Ordinary People, a quiet, devastating portrait of grief and family dysfunction. The film won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Director for Redford. It was a triumph of restraint, empathy, and vision. Over the next 4 decades, Redford continued to challenge himself and his audience. He directed and starred in films that explored conscience, Quiz Show, Nature, A River Runs Through It, and resilience, All Is Lost. Even in his final roles, such as The Old Man and The Gun, he brought a gentle dignity to characters who, like him, were saying goodbye with grace. Yet Redford's greatest legacy may be Sundance. Founded in 1981, the Sundance Institute and Film Festival became a lifeline for independent filmmakers. It was his gift to the future, a place where stories could be told without compromise, where voices on the margins could be heard, and where cinema could remain a force for truth. Beyond film, Redford was a tireless advocate for the environment, civil liberties, and political transparency. He spoke out when others stayed silent. He used his fame not to shield himself, but to amplify causes that mattered. His personal life was marked by both joy and sorrow. He married historian Lola Van Wageningen, with whom he had 4 children, and later married painter Sybil Zaggers. He endured the unimaginable loss of 2 sons, yet remained steadfast in his devotion to family, art, and justice. Today, the tributes are pouring in from actors, directors, activists, and fans. They speak of his generosity, his mentorship, his courage. They recall the moments he gave them, on screen, in conversation, through the institutions he built. Robert Redford's legacy is not just cinematic. It is cultural. It is ethical. it is enduring. He taught us that storytelling is a sacred act, that beauty and truth are worth fighting for, and that one person can change the world, not with noise, but with integrity. To honor him, leave a message, R.I.P. Robert Redford, or simply the number 89. Let it be a whisper of gratitude for a man who gave us stories that will never fade. He was the Sundance Kid, the quiet revolutionary, the artist who believed in the power of light, shadow, and silence. And now he belongs to history, not as a relic, but as a guide. Marilyn Knowlden, one of the last living links to Hollywood's golden age, passed away on September 15, 2025, at the remarkable age of 98. Her death closes a chapter not only in film history, but in the memory of a time when innocence and wonder were the currency of the screen. Born in Oakland, California in 1926, Knowlden entered the world of acting at just 4 years old. In an era when talking pictures were still finding their voice, she became one of the most recognizable child performers of the 1930s, a small figure with a big emotional presence. Her face, framed by curls and wide eyes, became a symbol of vulnerability, resilience, and hope. She appeared in more than 30 films, often cast as the daughter or younger version of leading stars. Her performances were not mere decoration, they were emotional anchors. Audiences remembered her touching portrayals in imitation of life. 1934, Les Miserables, 1935, and Angels with Dirty Faces, 1938. In each, she brought a depth that belied her age, offering moments of tenderness that softened even the hardest narratives. Knowlden worked alongside some of the era's most towering figures, Bette Davis, Claudette Colbert, James Cagney. Yet she never sought the spotlight beyond the role. She was a professional even as a child, known for her focus, her humility, and her ability to listen to the director, to the story, to the moment. By the early 1940s, she stepped away from film to pursue her education. It was a quiet exit, not a fall from grace, but a graceful pivot. She later built careers outside of Hollywood, choosing a life of reflection rather than fame. Yet she remained connected to the industry through interviews, film festivals, and archival projects. Her voice, soft, measured, and rich with memory, became a bridge between generations. In later life, Knowlden was cherished not only for what she had done, but for what she represented. She was a living witness to the earliest days of cinema, a reminder that the screen once flickered with innocence and moral clarity. Her longevity gave her a rare perspective. She had seen the industry evolve from black and white morality tales to technicolor complexity, and she carried that history with grace. Marilyn Knowlden will be remembered as more than a child star. She was a keeper of cinematic memory, a performer whose youthful roles added warmth and humanity to some of the most enduring films of the 1930s. Her legacy lives in the images preserved on screen, moments of laughter, tears, and quiet strength. To honor her memory, you may comment R.I.P. Marilyn Knowlden or leave the number 98, her age, as a tribute to her long life and contribution to film history. She was the child who held the light, and even now, that light still glows, softly, eternally, in the frames she left behind. Marilyn Knowlden, a former child actress whose career began in the earliest days of sound cinema, passed away on September 15, 2025, at the age of 98. Her passing marks the quiet end of a living bridge between generations, a performer whose youthful presence helped shape the emotional language of Hollywood's golden age. Born in Oakland, California in 1926, Knowlden entered the world of film at just 4 years old. At a time when the industry was still learning how to speak, literally, she became one of the first children to master the art of screen emotion. Her performances were not just cute or precocious, they were deeply felt, often anchoring the moral heart of the stories she inhabited. She appeared in more than 30 films throughout the 1930s, often cast as the daughter, the younger version, or the emotional mirror of leading stars. Her roles were small in size but vast in impact. In Imitation of Life, 1934, she portrayed a child caught in the complexities of race and identity. In Les Miserables, 1935, she embodied innocence in a world of injustice. And in Angels with Dirty Faces, 1938, She offered a glimpse of purity in a story steeped in crime and redemption. Knowlden worked alongside some of the most iconic figures of the era, Bette Davis, Claudette Colbert, James Cagney, yet she never sought to overshadow them. Her gift was in complementing, in deepening, in listening. Directors praised her ability to take direction with maturity beyond her years. Co-stars admired her quiet focus. Audiences fell in love with her sincerity. By the early 1940s, as she approached adolescence, Knowlden made the decision to step away from film. It was not a retreat, but a graceful transition. She pursued education, explored other careers, and chose a life of reflection rather than spotlight. Yet she never severed her connection to the industry. In later years, she became a cherished guest at film festivals, retrospectives, and interviews. Her voice, gentle, articulate, and rich with memory, became a living archive. She spoke not only of her own experiences, but of the broader cultural shifts she had witnessed. She remembered the smell of nitrate film, the hum of studio lights, the way directors used silence as a tool. Her longevity gave her a rare perspective. She had seen the industry evolve from black and white morality tales to technicolor spectacle, from studio control to independent rebellion, from celluloid to digital. And through it all, she remained a quiet witness, never bitter, always grateful. Marilyn Knowlden will be remembered not just as a child star, but as a symbol of cinema's earliest hopes. Her performances added warmth and humanity to some of the most enduring films of the 1930s. Her legacy lives in the flicker of old reels, in the grain of archival footage, in the hearts of those who still believe in the magic of storytelling. To honor her memory, you may comment R.I.P. Marilyn Knowlden or leave the number 98, her age, as a tribute to her long life and contribution to film history. She was the little girl who stood at the edge of the spotlight and gave it meaning. She carried the light of a bygone age, and even now that light continues to glow, softly, eternally in the stories she helped tell. Paula Shaw, the actress whose career stretched gracefully across more than 4 decades of film and television, passed away on September 10, 2025. She was 83. Her death marks the loss of a performer whose work was never about spotlight, but always about substance. Born in 1942, Shaw entered the entertainment world not with fanfare, but with focus. From her earliest screen roles in the 1970s, she demonstrated a rare ability to inhabit characters fully, whether in drama, comedy, science fiction, or fantasy. She was not a star in the traditional sense. She was something more enduring, a reliable presence, a quiet force, a thread that held stories together. Audiences may best remember her as Elder Gan Gray in X-Men, The Last Stand, 2006. A brief but impactful role that connected her to one of the most popular film franchises of its era. In just a few moments of screen time, she conveyed wisdom, gravity, and emotional depth, leaving an impression that lingered long after the credits rolled. But Shaw's career was built not on blockbusters, but on consistency. She appeared in television staples that defined generations, The X-Files, Supernatural, The Twilight Zone, Smallville. In each, she brought authenticity to the roles she inhabited, never overplaying, never underdelivering. Her performances were grounded, believable, and quietly powerful. She also worked steadily in Canadian productions, earning recognition for her versatility and the ease with which she supported leading casts. Directors praised her professionalism. Co-stars admired her kindness. Audiences trusted her. She was the kind of actress who made every scene feel real, not by dominating it, but by deepening it. Off-camera, Shaw was known for her quiet discipline and unwavering dedication to her craft. She didn't chase fame. She pursued truth. Her colleagues described her as generous, focused, and deeply respectful of the work. She understood that acting was not about being seen. It was about seeing others and helping audiences see themselves. Her journey as an actress reflected a life of purpose rather than pursuit. She chose roles that mattered, stories that resonated, and projects that allowed her to contribute meaningfully. From science fiction franchises to intimate dramas, her presence enriched every narrative she touched. Paula Shaw will be remembered not for headlines, but for heart. She was the kind of performer who made you lean in, who made you believe, who made you feel. Her legacy is woven into the fabric of television and film, not in bold strokes, but in quiet threads that hold everything together. To honor her life and the countless performances she left behind, you may comment R.I.P. Paula Shaw, or simply write the number 83, her age, as a tribute to a woman whose work was never loud, but always lasting. She was the quiet force behind the frame, and now her silence speaks volumes. Paula Shaw, the actress whose career stretched across more than 4 decades of film and television, passed away on September 10, 2025. She was 83. Her passing marks the departure of a performer whose artistry was defined not by volume, but by presence, not by fame, but by fidelity to the craft. Born in 1942, Shaw entered the world of acting with a quiet determination and a deep respect for the stories she helped tell. From her earliest roles in the 1970s, she demonstrated an uncanny ability to disappear into character, not to vanish, but to become. She was the kind of actress who made space sacred, who understood that the power of a scene often lived in its silences. Her filmography is a testament to versatility. She moved effortlessly between genres, appearing in dramas, comedies, thrillers, and science fiction. Audiences may best remember her as Elder Gan Grey in X-Men, The Last Stand, 2006, a brief but resonant role that connected her to one of the most influential film franchises of the modern era. In just a few lines, she conveyed wisdom, gravity, and emotional depth, leaving a lasting impression in a universe filled with spectacle. But Shaw's true legacy lies in the quiet corridors of television. She built a career on guest appearances that elevated every show she touched. From The X-Files to Supernatural, The Twilight Zone to Smallville, she brought authenticity to characters who might otherwise have been forgotten. Her performances were never ornamental. They were essential. She also worked steadily in Canadian productions, earning respect for her professionalism and the ease with which she supported leading casts. Directors trusted her. Co-stars admired her. Audiences felt her. She was the kind of performer who made you lean in, who made you believe, who made you feel. Off-camera, Shaw was known for her discipline, her kindness, and her unwavering commitment to the work. She didn't chase celebrity. She pursued truth. Her colleagues described her as generous, focused, and deeply respectful of the process. She understood that acting was not about being seen. It was about seeing others and helping audiences see themselves. Her journey as an actress reflected a life of purpose rather than pursuit. She chose roles that mattered, stories that resonated, and projects that allowed her to contribute meaningfully. She was not a star in the traditional sense. She was something more enduring, a quiet force, a steady hand, a soul who gave shape to emotion. Paula Shaw will be remembered not for headlines, but for heart. Her legacy is woven into the fabric of television and film, not in bold strokes, but in quiet threads that hold everything together. She was the kind of performer who made every scene feel real, not by dominating it, but by deepening it. To honor her life and the countless performances she left behind, you may comment R.I.P. Paula Shaw, or simply write the number 83, her age, as a tribute to a woman whose work was never loud, but always lasting. She was the quiet force behind the frame, the actress who made space sacred, and now her silence speaks volumes. Holliday, the Emmy-nominated actress best remembered for her unforgettable role as Flo in Alice, passed away on September 9, 2025. She was 87. Her death marks the loss of a performer whose voice, attitude, and comedic timing helped define an era of American television. Born on July 2, 1937, in Jasper, Alabama, Holliday's journey to stardom began on the stage. Before television brought her national fame, she honed her craft in regional theater, developing a style that blended Southern charm with razor-sharp wit. She was a character actress in the truest sense, someone who could take a supporting role and make it unforgettable. Her breakout came in the 1970s when she was cast as Florence Jean Flo Castleberry in the hit sitcom Alice. With her signature sass and the now iconic catchphrase, "Kiss my grits," Holliday didn't just play a waitress. She created a cultural archetype. Flo was brash, bold, and unapologetically herself. She spoke her mind, stood her ground, and made audiences laugh with a wink and a drawl. The role earned Holliday 2 Golden Globe Awards and 4 Emmy nominations. But more than accolades, It earned her a place in the hearts of viewers who saw in Flo a reflection of working-class resilience, humor, and heart. She later headlined the short-lived spin-off Flo, further cementing her status as a television icon. Beyond sitcom fame, Holliday showed remarkable range. She appeared in films such as Gremlins, 1984, where she played the stern Mrs. Deagle, and Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, where she brought warmth and authority to a supporting role. She also had a recurring part on Home Improvement, proving that her comedic instincts remained sharp across decades. Critics praised her ability to balance humor with humanity. She could make you laugh in one moment and feel in the next. Her characters were never caricatures. They were people. Real, flawed, funny, and full of life. Though she stepped away from the spotlight in her later years, Holliday remained deeply respected by peers and beloved by fans. She occasionally returned to the stage, revisiting the roots of her craft with the same passion that had carried her through television and film. Polly Holliday's career defined a television era. She gave us characters that felt familiar, comforting, and fiercely alive. She reminded us that humor could be a form of strength, and that even the smallest roles could leave the biggest impressions. To honor her memory, you may comment R.I.P. Polly Holliday or leave the number 87, her age, as a tribute to a woman who gave so much joy to the screen. She was Flo. She was grit. She was grace. And now she is legend. Polly Holliday, the Emmy-nominated actress whose voice could cut through a diner's clatter and whose warmth could soften the sharpest punchline, passed away on September 9, 2025. She was 87. Her passing closes the curtain on a career that gave television one of its most unforgettable characters and gave audiences a reason to smile, even on the hardest days. Born on July 2, 1937 in Jasper, Alabama, Holliday grew up in a world where storytelling was a survival skill. Her Southern roots weren't just part of her accent. They were part of her rhythm, her timing, her truth. Before she ever stepped onto a soundstage, she was already a performer, shaped by porch conversations, church plays, and the kind of humor that comes from knowing life isn't always easy. She began her career on the stage, where she developed the tools that would later make her a television powerhouse: emotional precision, comedic instinct, and a voice that could carry both sass and sincerity. Her training was classical, but her delivery was unmistakably her own. Then came Alice. Cast as Florence Jean Flo Castleberry, Holliday didn't just play a waitress. She redefined what a supporting character could be. Flo was loud, proud, and full of fire. She didn't ask for permission, she didn't apologize, and she didn't back down. With her signature line, "Kiss my grits," she became a pop culture icon, a symbol of working-class defiance wrapped in Southern charm. The role earned her 2 Golden Globe Awards and 4 Emmy nominations. But more than that, it earned her a permanent place in the American imagination. Flo wasn't just funny, she was real. She was the woman behind the counter who knew your order and your secrets. She was the friend who told it like it was. She was the voice that reminded you not to take life too seriously. Holliday later starred in the spin-off Flo, and while the series was short-lived, her performance remained electric. She brought the same energy, the same heart, the same grit. And she proved that even when the spotlight shifted, her light never dimmed. Her film work revealed a different side of her talent. In Gremlins, 1984, she played the villainous Mrs. Deagle with delicious menace. In Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, she offered a grounded counterbalance to the chaos. And in Home Improvement, she returned to television with the same ease and authenticity that had defined her career. Critics admired her range, audiences adored her honesty, and fellow actors respected her ability to make every role feel lived in. She wasn't flashy, she was fierce. She didn't chase fame, she chased truth. In her later years, Holliday stepped away from the screen but never from the stage. She returned to theater, where her journey had begun, performing with the same passion that had carried her through decades of television and film. She remained a beloved figure, quiet, gracious, and deeply respected. Polly Holliday's legacy is not just in the lines she delivered, but in the lives she touched. She gave us laughter when we needed it, strength when we lacked it, and characters who reminded us that being bold and being kind are not mutually exclusive. To honor her memory, you may comment R.I.P. Polly Holliday or leave the number 87, her age, as a tribute to a woman who gave television its sass, its soul, and its southern spark. She was flow. She was fire. She was the grit behind the grin. And now, she is part of the story forever. Bruce DuMont, longtime radio host, media historian, and founder of one of America's most important broadcast institutions, passed away on September 10, 2025. He was 79. His death marks the loss of a voice that didn't just echo through the airwaves, it helped shape the tone of civil discourse in American media. Born in Chicago in 1946, DuMont came of age in a city where radio was more than entertainment. It was a lifeline. He began his career in local broadcasting, learning the rhythms of conversation, the weight of silence, and the power of listening. He understood early on that media wasn't just about volume, it was about values. In 1980, he launched Beyond the Beltway, a nationally syndicated political talk program that would become a Sunday night staple for listeners across the country. At its height, the show aired on more than 50 stations nationwide, offering spirited but respectful debate from voices across the political spectrum. DuMont wasn't interested in shouting matches. He wanted clarity, nuance, and the kind of dialogue that could move minds without hardening hearts. For over 4 decades, Beyond the Beltway became a trusted space for civic engagement. DuMont's moderation was firm but fair. He asked questions that mattered. He challenged assumptions, and he made room for disagreement without division. In an era of rising polarization, his show remained a rare sanctuary for thoughtful conversation. But DuMont's contributions extended far beyond the microphone. In 1983, he founded the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago, a visionary institution dedicated to preserving the history and impact of radio and television in American life. As president, he oversaw the curation of archives, exhibitions, and educational programs that celebrated the voices, images, and innovations that shaped generations. The museum became not just a building, but a beacon. It honored the pioneers of broadcasting, documented the evolution of media, and reminded visitors that behind every signal was a story. DuMont believed that media was memory, and he made it his mission to protect that memory for the future. His work earned him respect not only as a broadcaster, but as a cultural curator. He was a mentor to young journalists, a guide to media scholars, and a steady presence in a field often driven by noise. He didn't chase trends, he built foundations. Bruce DuMont is survived by his family and by generations of colleagues, students, and listeners who benefited from his dedication to the craft of broadcasting. His legacy endures in the conversations he hosted, the institution he built, and the quiet integrity with which he lived. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. Bruce DuMont or leave the number 79, his age, as a tribute to a man whose voice helped shape American radio. He was the moderator, the archivist, the voice that never shouted but always spoke. And now his silence leaves a space we must fill with civility, with curiosity, and with care. Hermeto Pascoal, the Brazilian composer, multi-instrumentalist, and sonic visionary whose imagination seemed to defy gravity, passed away on September 13, 2025. He was 88. His death marks the loss of one of music's most fearless explorers, a man who didn't just play instruments, but transformed the world into one. Born in 1937 in Lagoa da Canoa, Alagoas, Pascoal grew up in rural Brazil, partially blind and surrounded by nature. From an early age, he heard music in everything: the wind through sugarcane, the rhythm of rain on tin roofs, the pulse of animals in motion. His world was not silent. It was symphonic. By the 1960s, Pascoal had emerged as one of Brazil's most inventive musicians. He blended folk traditions with jazz improvisation, classical structures with experimental soundscapes. He played piano, flute, saxophone, guitar, and countless other instruments, but he also played teapots, rubber ducks, and water itself. To Hermeto, sound was sacred, and everything that made sound was an instrument waiting to be discovered. Known affectionately as O Bruxo, the wizard, Pascoal was revered for his ability to conjure music from the unexpected. His performances were part ritual, part rebellion. He didn't just challenge musical norms. He dismantled them, rebuilt them, and invited listeners into a world where melody and madness danced together. One of his most celebrated collaborations was with Miles Davis, who once called Pascoal the most impressive musician in the world. Their work together on Live Evil introduced Pascoal's genius to international audiences, and his influence rippled across continents. Throughout his career, he composed prolifically, creating works for orchestras, ensembles, soloists, and even animals. He believed music should be inclusive, intuitive, and infinite. His albums, such as Slave's Mass and Lagoa da Canoa Municipio de Arapiraca, are considered masterpieces of avant-garde composition, blending humor, spirituality, and technical brilliance. Pascoal was also a beloved teacher and mentor. He nurtured generations of Brazilian musicians, encouraging them to listen beyond the notes, to trust their instincts, and to honor their roots. He taught that music was not just a skill, it was a way of being. Even in his later years, Pascoal remained a force of nature. His white hair, wild beard, and radiant smile became symbols of creative freedom. He performed with the energy of a man possessed, not by ego, but by joy. Hermeto Pascoal's legacy is not confined to recordings or performances. It lives in the philosophy he embodied, that music is everywhere, that creativity is limitless, and that the world itself is a symphony waiting to be heard. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. Hermeto Pascoal or leave the number 88, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned life into music and music into magic. He was the wizard, the alchemist, the man who taught us that sound is not just heard, it is felt, lived, and loved. And now, his silence is filled with echoes. Hermeto Pascoal, the Brazilian composer, multi-instrumentalist, and sonic visionary whose imagination knew no boundaries, passed away on September 13, 2025. He was 88. His death marks the end of a life lived in sound, a life that taught the world to listen differently, to hear music not just in instruments, but in existence itself. Born on June 22, 1937, in Lagoa da Canoa, Alagoas, Brazil, Pascoal was born with albinism and poor eyesight. These challenges might have silenced another child, but for Hermeto they amplified the world. He heard rhythms in the wind, melodies in the rustle of leaves, and harmonies in the clatter of everyday life. From the start, he was not just a musician. He was a sonic alchemist. His concerts became legendary spectacles where he moved seamlessly from keyboards to flutes to teapots. Yes, teapots. Transforming ordinary objects into instruments of wonder. He didn't just play music, he conjured it. Albums like Hermeto, 1972, and Slave's Mass, 1977, showcased his fearless creativity, merging Brazilian rhythms with daring improvisations. These works weren't just records. They were experiments in freedom, proof that genre was a suggestion, not a rule. Over 7 decades, Pascoal composed prolifically, mentored countless artists, and brought Brazilian sound to the global stage. His collaborations with legends like Miles Davis earned him international acclaim, but he never abandoned his roots. He remained a champion of Brazilian culture, blending folk traditions with avant-garde exploration. He was affectionately known as O Bruxo, the Wizard, and rightly so. His music was magic, his performances were spells, his life was a ritual of joy, defiance, and boundless creativity. Pascoal's legacy is not confined to recordings or accolades. It lives in the philosophy he embodied, that music is everywhere, that imagination is sacred, and that the world itself is a symphony waiting to be heard. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. Hermeto Pascoal or leave the number 88, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned imagination into melody and melody into meaning. He was the wizard of sound, the teacher of freedom, the man who taught us that music is not just played, it is lived. Bobby Hart, the songwriter, producer, and performer whose melodies became part of America's musical DNA, passed away on September 10, 2025. He was 84. His death marks the loss of a man whose work didn't just top charts, it became the soundtrack of a generation. Born in Phoenix, Arizona in 1941, Hart came of age in a country on the cusp of cultural transformation. Music was shifting, from crooners to rockers, from ballads to beat. And Bobby Hart was there, not just to witness it, but to shape it. In the early 1960s, he teamed up with Tommy Boyce to form one of pop music's most successful songwriting duos, Boyce and Hart. Together, they created hits that defined the era, songs that were catchy, clever, and emotionally resonant. Their partnership was more than chemistry, it was craft. They wrote and produced for the Monkees, penning classics like Last Train to Clarksville, Theme from the Monkees, and Valerie. These weren't just songs, they were cultural moments. They helped launch the Monkees into global stardom, selling millions of records and shaping the sound of 1960s American pop. But Hart's influence extended beyond the Monkees. He wrote for artists like Chubby Checker, Little Anthony and the Imperials, and Paul Revere and the Raiders. His melodies were versatile, his lyrics timeless. Whether crafting bubblegum pop or soulful ballads, Hart had a gift for finding the emotional center of a song. Boyce and Hart also found success as performers with hits like I Wonder What She's Doing Tonight. Their voices carried the same energy as their writing, playful, heartfelt, and unmistakably theirs. After Tommy Boyce's death in 1994, Hart continued to perform and advocate for songwriters' rights. He understood that behind every hit was a creator, and he fought to ensure those voices were heard and respected. His efforts helped elevate the status of songwriters in an industry that often overlooked them. His contributions earned him induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, a recognition not just of his talent, but of his impact. Bobby Hart's legacy is found in the timeless hooks and melodies that defined a generation. His work lives on every time a Monkees song plays, every time a chorus lifts a crowd, every time music brings joy. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. Bobby Hart or leave the number 84, his age, as a tribute to the man whose songs became part of America's soundtrack. He was the hooksmith, the harmony maker, the quiet architect of joy, and now his music plays on in hearts, in radios, in history. Bobby Hart, the prolific songwriter, producer, and performer whose melodies helped define the sound of 1960s pop, passed away on September 10, 2025. He was 84. His death marks the loss of a man whose pen shaped the pulse of a generation, a craftsman of joy, rhythm, and emotional clarity. Born in Phoenix, Arizona in 1941, Hart grew up in a country where radio was king and vinyl was sacred. He understood early on that music wasn't just entertainment, it was identity. It was how young people found themselves, how they rebelled, how they fell in love. And Bobby Hart gave them the soundtrack. In the early 1960s, he joined forces with Tommy Boyce, forming the legendary duo Boyce and Hart. Together, they became architects of the American pop explosion. Their songs weren't just hits, they were cultural anchors. They wrote with precision, with playfulness, and with a deep understanding of what made a chorus stick in the heart. Their work with the Monkees became the stuff of legend. Last Train to Clarksville, Theme from the Monkees, Valerie, these weren't just chart toppers. They were generational anthems. They captured the spirit of youth, the thrill of rebellion, the sweetness of longing. Hart and Boyce didn't just write songs, they wrote moments. Beyond the Monkees, Hart's influence rippled outward. He penned hits for Chubby Checker, Little Anthony and the Imperials, Paul Revere and the Raiders. His melodies crossed genres, his lyrics crossed borders. He had a gift for finding the emotional center of a song, whether it was playful, romantic, or quietly profound. As performers, Boyce and Hart brought their own energy to the stage. Their hit, I Wonder What She's Doing Tonight, became a fan favorite, showcasing their ability to blend songwriting with performance. They weren't just behind the scenes, they were part of the scene. After Tommy Boyce's passing in 1994, Hart carried the torch. He continued to perform, to write, and to advocate for the rights of songwriters. He understood that behind every hit was a creator, and he fought to ensure those creators were respected, protected, and remembered. His efforts earned him induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, a recognition that placed him among the greats. But Hart's legacy is not just in awards. It's in the echoes of his songs, in the way they still play on radios, in movies, in memories. His work lives on every time a Monkees track lifts a room, every time a nostalgic melody brings a smile, every time a chorus reminds someone of who they were when they first heard it. Bobby Hart's music is woven into the fabric of American youth. into the rhythm of pop culture, into the emotional architecture of countless lives. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. Bobby Hart or leave the number 84, his age, as a tribute to the man whose songs became part of America's heartbeat. He was the melody maker, the lyrical craftsman, the quiet revolutionary who proved that 3 minutes of music could change everything. And now, his legacy plays on, in harmony, in history, and in the hearts of those who still believe in the magic of a perfect song. Marilyn Knowlden, the veteran North Dakota journalist whose plain-spoken columns and restaurant reviews became a staple of American small-town life, passed away on September 16, 2025. She was 97. Her death marks the end of a voice that never chased headlines, but instead captured the quiet poetry of daily living. Born in 1928, Knowlden grew up in a world where news was local, stories were personal, and writing was a form of service. She began her career in the 1950s at the Grand Forks Herald, where she would remain for more than 6 decades. Her columns were not flashy, they were faithful. She wrote about community events, civic meetings, new diners, and old friendships. She chronicled the heartbeat of a town, one paragraph at a time. Her writing was marked by sincerity, clarity, and a deep respect for her readers. She didn't editorialize, she observed. She didn't embellish, she illuminated. Her reviews of restaurants were not critiques, they were invitations. She welcomed readers into booths and buffets, describing the decor, the service, the soup of the day. In 2012, Knowlden's career took an unexpected national turn when her earnest review of an Olive Garden went viral. The column, which described the breadsticks and ambience with genuine appreciation, sparked both light-hearted amusement and profound respect. In a media landscape often dominated by irony and snark, Knowlden's unpretentious style felt like a breath of fresh air. Suddenly, she was everywhere, interviewed by national outlets, celebrated by food critics, and embraced by readers far beyond North Dakota. But she remained unchanged. She kept writing. She kept reviewing. She kept showing up. She later collected her work in Grand Forks, a book of 128 reviews that became a quiet history of American dining. It wasn't just about food. It was about community, memory, and the simple joy of sharing a meal. Known for her persistence and generosity, Knowlden remained active in journalism well into her 90s. She was admired not just for her longevity, but for the authenticity that defined her work. She didn't write to impress. She wrote to connect. Marilyn Knowlden's legacy is that of a journalist who understood that everyday stories matter deeply. She showed that the ordinary is never truly ordinary, that within the routines of small-town life are moments of grace, humor, and quiet heroism. To honor her memory, you may comment R.I.P. Marilyn Knowlden or leave the number 97, her age, as a tribute to the decades she devoted to journalism and the dignity she brought to every word. She was the columnist, the chronicler, the woman who made the everyday eternal. And now her words live on in archives, in hearts, and in the quiet corners of every town she helped us see more clearly. Giorgio Armani, the legendary Italian designer whose minimalist vision transformed global fashion, passed away on September 4, 2025. He was 91. His death marks the end of a life devoted to refinement, a life that taught the world that elegance is not excess, but essence. Born on July 11, 1934, in Piacenza, Italy, Armani's path to fashion was not immediate. He first studied medicine, a discipline rooted in precision and care. But his true calling emerged in the world of design, where he began as a window dresser and assistant at the fashion house Cerruti. From these humble beginnings, he would build an empire. In 1975, Armani launched his own label and with it, a revolution. His soft-shouldered suits stripped away the rigidity of traditional menswear, replacing structure with flow, formality with ease. His designs didn't shout, they whispered. They spoke of confidence without arrogance, power without pretense. One of his defining moments came in 1980 when his tailored looks were featured in American Gigolo. The film didn't just showcase Armani's clothing, it made them iconic. Suddenly, a suit wasn't just something you wore, it was a statement, a silhouette, a philosophy. From that moment, Armani's influence spread across continents. His empire grew from a small Milan workshop into a global brand encompassing haute couture, ready-to-wear, Emporio Armani, Armani Exchange, and more. By 2024, his business had reached a valuation of euros 9 billion, with over 2,500 retail stores worldwide. But Armani's genius was not just in scale, it was in restraint. He proved that fashion could be luxurious without being loud, that beauty could be found in simplicity. His designs moved effortlessly from red carpets to city streets, always maintaining their signature clarity. He remained the sole owner of his company, a rare feat in an industry often driven by conglomerates. His control ensured that his vision remained pure, uncompromised, and deeply personal. Beyond fashion, Armani expanded into lifestyle ventures, home furnishings, fragrances, hotels, and restaurants. Each carried his aesthetic, clean lines, muted tones, and an unwavering commitment to quality. He also pushed industry standards. In 2016, he went fur-free, setting a precedent for ethical fashion. During the 2020 pandemic, he repurposed his factories to produce medical gowns and donated millions to healthcare causes. His philanthropy was quiet but impactful, reflecting the same understated strength that defined his designs. Armani's influence stretched beyond runways. He shaped architecture, sustainability, and the very language of style. He didn't just dress people, he dressed eras. He gave form to feeling, silhouette to spirit. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. Giorgio Armani or leave the number 91, his age, as a tribute to the man who taught the world that elegance is not about being noticed, but about being remembered. He was the tailor of time, the sculptor of simplicity, the architect of elegance, and now his legacy walks on in every garment, every gesture, every quiet revolution of style. George Clooney, the actor, director, producer, and humanitarian whose name became synonymous with elegance and charisma, passed away on September 18, 2025. He was 64. His death marks the loss of a figure who embodied the last glimmer of Hollywood's golden age, a man whose presence elevated every room, every role, and every cause he touched. Born on May 6, 1961, in Lexington, Kentucky, Clooney was raised in a family steeped in talent and public service. His father, Nick Clooney, was a respected television host and journalist. His mother, Nina Bruce, a beauty queen turned civic leader. His aunt, Rosemary Clooney, was a beloved singer and actress whose voice defined an era. Even his distant lineage traced back to Abraham Lincoln. To the outside world, Clooney's path seemed destined, but behind the charm and the cheekbones was a boy who knew suffering. At age 13, he was struck by Bell's palsy, a neurological disorder that paralyzed half his face for nearly a year. For a teenager, it was a cruel twist. One eye wouldn't close. Half his mouth refused to move. Classrooms became arenas of shame. Mirrors became enemies. Yet from this crucible came his greatest weapon, humor. Clooney learned to disarm mockery with wit, to turn embarrassment into performance, and to transform vulnerability into strength. He became, in a sense, the director of his own survival, mastering the art of controlling the room before anyone else could. His breakthrough came as Dr. Doug Ross on ER, where he played a pediatrician with a heart as complex as his past. The role catapulted him into stardom, but Clooney never let fame define him. He chose roles that challenged, stories that mattered. From Syriana to Michael Clayton, Up in the Air to The Descendants, he brought depth, nuance, and quiet power to every performance. As a director, he proved equally fearless. Films like Good Night and Good Luck and The Ids of March showcased his political conscience and cinematic precision. He wasn't just interested in entertainment, he was interested in truth. Off-screen, Clooney became a global humanitarian. He advocated for human rights in Darfur, supported disaster relief efforts, and used his platform to amplify causes often ignored. He didn't just lend his name, he lent his time, his voice, his heart. Yet even in his final years, Clooney remained enigmatic. Behind the tuxedos and the flashbulbs was a man who carried quiet burdens, physical pain, emotional scars, and a longing for simplicity. He spoke often of family, of friendship, of the need to stay grounded. George Clooney's legacy is not just cinematic, it is human. He showed us that charm can coexist with conscience, that fame can serve purpose, and that elegance is not about perfection, but about presence. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to the man who turned suffering into strength and style into substance. He was the gentleman, the icon, the boy who learned to laugh through pain, and now his story becomes part of ours, etched in film in memory and in the quiet grace he carried through it all. The divorce from Talia Balsam marked a turning point in George Clooney's life, not just romantically, but existentially. It was the moment he realized that ambition alone could not fill the spaces left by intimacy, nor could success erase the ache of emotional failure. He had chased a dream and lost a companion. And in the quiet that followed, he began to reshape himself, not as a husband, but as a solitary force. For years afterward, Clooney would speak of marriage as something he wasn't built for. He became Hollywood's most eligible bachelor, a man who seemed to glide through relationships with charm and detachment. But beneath the headlines and the flirtations was a man still nursing wounds, still wondering if love, like fame, came with a price he wasn't willing to pay. He threw himself into work, into roles that demanded emotional complexity, into directing, producing, and building a legacy that would outlast the tabloid narratives. He became known not just for his performances, but for his principles. He spoke out against injustice, supported humanitarian causes, and used his platform to amplify voices that Hollywood often ignored. And yet, the loneliness lingered. The boy who once hid behind humor had become a man who hid behind purpose. He was admired, respected, adored, but rarely understood. Then, in 2013, something shifted. Clooney met Amal Alameddin, a brilliant international human rights lawyer whose intellect matched his wit and whose grace matched his charm. Their connection was immediate, but unlike past romances, this one was rooted in mutual admiration, shared values, and a deep respect for each other's work. In 2014, they married in Venice in a ceremony that felt less like spectacle and more like a rival. For Clooney, it was not just a wedding, it was a reckoning. A moment when the mask softened, when the survivor allowed himself to be seen. Fatherhood followed. In 2017, Clooney and Amal welcomed twins, Ella and Alexander, and with them came a new chapter, one defined not by red carpets, but by bedtime stories, quiet mornings, and the kind of love that doesn't need applause. Clooney's later years were marked by balance. He continued to act, direct, and produce, but he also stepped back, choosing projects that aligned with his values rather than his vanity. He became a mentor, a philanthropist, a man who had nothing left to prove but everything left to give. His story is not one of effortless success, but of resilience born in pain. It is the story of a boy who learned to smile through suffering, a man who learned to lead through empathy, and a legend who learned that true strength lies not in charm, but in vulnerability. To honor George Clooney's legacy, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned scars into stories and stories into light. He was the survivor, the storyteller, the man who rebuilt himself in silence and gave the world a voice worth listening to. As George Clooney entered the final chapters of his life, he did so not with fanfare, but with focus. The man who once lit up screens with effortless charm had become something quieter, deeper, a steward of conscience, a mentor of grace, a living reminder that fame, when wielded with humility, can become a force for good. He continued to act, but selectively. His roles became fewer, more deliberate, each one chosen not for box office appeal, but for resonance. He lent his voice to stories that mattered, to characters that reflected the complexity of aging, of reckoning, of legacy. Behind the camera, he remained prolific. Through Smokehouse Pictures, he championed films that challenged systems, exposed truths, and elevated voices long silenced. He didn't chase trends, he chased meaning. His humanitarian work deepened. Clooney became a fixture in global advocacy, supporting refugees, fighting corruption, and funding education initiatives in war-torn regions. He didn't just donate, he showed up, he testified, he listened, he led. At home, he found peace. With Amal by his side, he embraced fatherhood with tenderness and awe. He spoke often of his children, not as heirs to a legacy, but as reminders of what truly mattered. He became a storyteller not just for the world, but for his family, reading bedtime tales, sharing quiet wisdom, and teaching that kindness is the highest form of strength. In interviews, he reflected more openly. He spoke of pain, of failure, of the long road to self-acceptance. He acknowledged the masks he wore, the battles he fought, and the grace he found in letting go. He became not just a star, but a sage, and when the end came, it was met not with shock, but with reverence. The tributes poured in from actors, directors, activists, and fans. They spoke of his generosity, his humor, his courage. They remembered the boy who once hid behind a crooked smile and the man who turned that smile into a beacon. George Clooney's legacy is not just cinematic. It is emotional, it is ethical, it is enduring. He taught us that charm can coexist with depth, that suffering can birth empathy, and that true greatness lies not in being adored, but in being understood. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned pain into purpose and presence into poetry. He was the survivor, the storyteller, the silver-haired statesman of cinema, and now his legacy lives on in film, in family, and in the quiet strength he carried through it all. In the final years of his life, George Clooney became something rare in Hollywood, a man who had nothing left to prove and everything left to preserve. He no longer chased roles. He chose them. He no longer sought attention. He gave it. And in doing so, he became not just a star, but a steward. He spent more time behind the scenes than in front of them, mentoring young filmmakers, funding independent projects, and using his production company Smokehouse Pictures to champion stories that mattered. He believed in cinema not as spectacle, but as mirror. A place where truth could be told and empathy could be born. His humanitarian work deepened. Clooney became a global advocate for justice, traveling to conflict zones, speaking at summits, and quietly funding relief efforts. He didn't do it for headlines. He did it because he understood suffering, because he had lived it. At home, he found peace in simplicity. With Amal, he built a life rooted in love, intellect, and shared purpose. Their children, Ella and Alexander, became his greatest joy. He spoke of them often, not as heirs to fame, but as reminders of what truly mattered. He aged with grace. The silver hair became whiter, the stride became slower, but the eyes, those eyes, never lost their spark. They still carried the mischief, the wisdom, the ache. He remained until the end a man who could make you laugh, make you think, and make you feel seen. When news of his passing broke, the world paused. Not because a celebrity had died, but because a chapter had closed. Tributes poured in from actors, activists, journalists, and fans. They spoke of his generosity, his humor, his courage. They remembered the boy who once hid behind a crooked smile and the man who turned that smile into a beacon. George Clooney's legacy is not just in the films he made or the awards he won. It's in the way he carried himself, in the way he turned pain into purpose, fame into service, and charm into connection. He taught us that elegance is not about perfection, but presence. That strength is not about silence, but vulnerability. That greatness is not about being adored, but being understood. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned scars into stories and stories into light. He was the echo that outlived the applause, the gentleman who carried grace and gravity. And now his legacy lives on in film, in family, and in the quiet strength he gave the world. In the years that followed their wedding, George Clooney and Amal Alameddin became more than a power couple. They became a portrait of balance. Their love was not performative. It was purposeful. Built not on appearances, but on shared values, mutual admiration, and the quiet rituals of daily life. George, once the symbol of unattached freedom, now spoke openly about devotion. He described Amal not just as his wife, but as his compass. "She's brilliant, she's compassionate, and she's the best person I've ever met," he said in interviews. And when he spoke, it wasn't with the rehearsed charm of a movie star. It was with the awe of a man who had finally found what he didn't know he was missing. In 2017, their world expanded. Amal gave birth to twins, Ella and Alexander. Clooney, who had once declared fatherhood wasn't for him, now found himself reading bedtime stories, changing diapers, and marveling at the tiny humans who had reshaped his priorities. "I'm a dad now," he said, "and it's the most important role I've ever had." He began to step back from Hollywood's relentless pace. He chose projects that allowed him to stay close to home. He directed films that aligned with his conscience, produced stories that elevated truth, and used his platform to advocate for justice. Fame no longer drove him. Family did. Their homes became sanctuaries, Lake Como, Los Angeles, Berkshire. Each one a place where laughter echoed through hallways, where work paused for dinner, and where love was not a performance but a practice. Together, George and Amal became symbols of what modern partnership could look like, two individuals with distinct callings, walking side by side, lifting each other higher. Amal continued her work in international law, defending the voiceless, challenging regimes, and shaping policy. George stood beside her, not as a celebrity, but as a husband in awe. At summits, he deferred to her expertise. At premieres, he praised her brilliance. "She's the real star," he often said, and the world began to see him not just as an actor, but as a man transformed by love. Their marriage wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but it was intentional. It was resilient. It was rooted in the kind of trust that only comes from surviving heartbreak and choosing to love again. George Clooney's legacy is not just in the films he made or the causes he championed. It's in the way he evolved, from a boy paralyzed by fear to a man paralyzed by fame, to a husband and father who finally found peace. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned solitude into sanctuary and who proved that even the most guarded hearts can find their way home. He was the bachelor who believed he was unlovable, the icon who thought he'd never belong. And in the end, he became the man who found forever in a woman who saw past the legend and into the soul. Fatherhood changed George Clooney in ways no role ever could. The man who once declared he wasn't built for marriage or children now found himself waking to the sound of tiny footsteps, learning lullabies, and marveling at the miracle of presence. Ella and Alexander weren't just his children, they were his compass. He spoke of them with reverence, not as extensions of his fame, but as reminders of everything he'd once thought impossible. "They're funny, they're kind, and they're curious," he said. "They make me better." And in those words, the world saw a man who had spent decades mastering performance, now mastering patience, humility, and unconditional love. Clooney began to reshape his life around them. He chose projects that allowed him to stay close to home. He turned down roles that required long shoots abroad. He traded red carpets for school pickups, premieres for playtime. The man who once lived in the spotlight now found joy in the shadows, where love was quiet and legacy was built one bedtime story at a time. He and Amal created a home filled with books, laughter, and purpose. Their children grew up surrounded not by celebrity, but by compassion. Clooney taught them about kindness, about resilience, about the importance of using one's voice to help others. He didn't want them to inherit fame. He wanted them to inherit values. And as he aged, Clooney became a mentor, not just to his children, but to younger actors, filmmakers, and activists. He offered guidance not with ego, but with empathy. He shared his mistakes, his regrets, his lessons. He reminded them that success without integrity is hollow, and that the most important stories are the ones we live, not the ones we tell. In his final years, Clooney was no longer chasing anything. He had arrived, not at a destination of wealth or acclaim, but at a place of peace. He had loved deeply, suffered quietly, and risen gracefully. He had turned pain into purpose, solitude into sanctuary, and fame into service. And when the time came to say goodbye, the world didn't just mourn a movie star. It mourned a man who had shown us that healing is possible, that love can arrive late but still be true, and that the most powerful legacy is not what we leave behind, but who we become. To honor George Clooney's memory, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned heartbreak into hope and who taught us that the greatest role we'll ever play is the one we live with love. George Clooney, once the embodiment of Hollywood's golden charm, has become something far more enduring. A man whose legacy is measured not in box office numbers, but in the lives he's touched, the causes he's championed, and the quiet strength he's cultivated through decades of transformation. He no longer seeks the spotlight. He walks beside it. He no longer performs for applause. He speaks for justice. And in every choice, every gesture, every moment spent with his family or in service to others, Clooney has rewritten the script of what it means to be a leading man. He is not fading. He is refining. In the twilight of fame, he has found clarity. In the stillness of fatherhood, he has found purpose. And in the enduring partnership with Amal, he has found the kind of love that doesn't need headlines to be real. George Clooney's legacy is not a single role, a single film, or a single moment. It is a mosaic, built from resilience, humor, heartbreak, and hope. It is the story of a man who once believed he wasn't built for love, who found it anyway. Who once feared vulnerability, and now wears it with grace. To honor his legacy, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned solitude into sanctuary, fame into service, and fatherhood into the most profound role of all. He was the survivor, the storyteller, the silver-haired statesman of cinema, and now his legacy lives on in film, in family, and in the quiet strength he gave the world. By 2025, George Clooney had become something rare in the entertainment world, a man at peace with his past, present, and future. He no longer chased roles, headlines, or accolades. He had already lived the arc of ambition, survived the crucible of fame, and emerged with something far more valuable, clarity. He was still active, still curious, still creatively engaged, but his choices were deliberate. He no longer needed to prove anything. Every film he touched, every cause he supported, every word he spoke carried the weight of a life fully lived. He had become a quiet, elder statesman of Hollywood, not the kind who lectures, but the kind who listens. Younger actors sought his advice. Journalists respected his boundaries. Audiences leaned in when he spoke, not because he was loud, but because he had earned the silence around his voice. At home, he was simply dad, pancake maker, bike ride companion, storyteller. He often said that the best part of his day was the moment his kids ran into his arms, that nothing he'd ever won, no Oscar, no headline, could compare to the feeling of being their safe place. He and Amal continued their work through the Clooney Foundation for Justice, quietly funding legal battles, building schools, and advocating for the voiceless. Their love, once a surprise to the world, had become a steady flame, unshaken by distance, fame, or time. And though Clooney still lived with chronic pain from his spinal injury, he bore it with grace. He had learned to slow down, to savor, to let go. He often joked that aging was humbling but also freeing. "You stop pretending you're invincible," he said, "and you start living like every moment matters." In interviews, he spoke less about movies and more about meaning, about legacy, about what he hoped his children would remember, not the roles he played, but the man he tried to be. George Clooney's final chapter was not a fade to black. It was a soft crescendo. A life that began with paralysis and uncertainty, that rose through heartbreak and reinvention, and that settled into a rhythm of love, service, and quiet joy. To honor his memory, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned pain into purpose, fame into humility, and fatherhood into his greatest role of all. He was the boy who learned to smile through suffering, the actor who gave charm a conscience, the father who found his way home, and now his legacy lives on, in every story told with heart, in every life touched with grace, and in every quiet moment that reminds us what truly matters. In the final stretch of his life, George Clooney became less a celebrity and more a symbol, a reminder that transformation is possible, that love can arrive late, and that the most meaningful legacy is built not in public, but in private. He was no longer the man who had everything. He was the man who had chosen what mattered, a husband who listened, a father who showed up, a citizen who spoke out, a storyteller who knew when to be silent. He spent his days in rhythm with the seasons. At Lake Como, he tended to his garden, read voraciously, and wrote quietly. He hosted friends not for spectacle, but for connection. He taught his children to ask questions, to be kind, to stand up for what's right. He and Amal continued their work through the Clooney Foundation for Justice, expanding their reach into new regions, new causes, new lives. They built schools in refugee camps, funded legal teams for unjustly imprisoned journalists, created scholarships for children displaced by war. George no longer needed the world's applause. He had found something deeper, the quiet joy of being useful, of being present, of being loved. And when the end came, it was met not with shock, but with reverence. The tributes were not just from actors and directors, but from teachers, lawyers, refugees, and children. People whose lives had been touched by his generosity, his advocacy, his example. He didn't leave behind just a filmography. He left behind a philosophy. That charm is best used to uplift. That fame is best used to protect. That love, when finally embraced, can heal even the oldest wounds. To honor George Clooney's legacy, you may comment R.I.P. George Clooney or leave the number 64, his age, as a tribute to a man who turned pain into purpose, spotlight into service, and family into forever. He was the boy who learned to smile through suffering, the actor who gave charm a conscience, the father who found his way home, and now his legacy lives on, in every story told with heart, in every life touched with grace, and in every quiet moment that reminds us what truly matters.